Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to another episode of Other Levels of the Tower, the Patreon-exclusive bonus Kingslingers podcast where we discuss adaptations of Stephen King's works. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the monster who lives in your closet. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, monster?
Oh, Scott, there's no such thing as monsters. Uh-oh. A raccoon bit me.
I was waiting for you. I thought you were going to make like a noise or like do something. There we go. Instead, you just said in complete monotone, uh-oh, a raccoon bit me.
I mean, I thought about, doing a pantomime series of dog barks into the microphone, but
yeah,
I don't know if that would have actually sounded good to anyone.
It possibly could not. I don't know. We'll see. Let us know, patrons.
You should just mix in extremely loud and terrifying, like way louder than normal dog barking, like when I started talking. That would.
I'm not going to lie to you. It's 9:30 at night, the night before this is supposed to come out, so I'm probably not going to do that.
Okay, fair enough.
Folks, this month on the show, we are going to take a look at Cujo. Matt, what is Cujo all about?
Cujo, a friendly Saint Bernard, contracts rabies and conducts a reign of terror on a small American town.
That's right. This is the 1983 movie based on Stephen King's 1981 novel. The movie was written by Don Carlos Dunaway and Barbara Turner, and it was directed by Louis Teague, who, of course, you will know, Matt, from Cat's Eye, The Jewel of the Nile, and, of course, the hit 1992 TV movie T-Bone and Weasel.
Yeah. That guy.
All right, Matt. Cujo, one of I think the King classics, one of the ones that is kind of synonymous with the name Stephen King. So, what did you think of this movie?
This is one of those ones where I've never seen it, but I feel like I probably knew the whole plot front to back just from osmosis.
Sure.
Now I say that, and then I watch the movie, and it still surprises me in a number of ways. I had no inkling of the affair plotline.
Mm-hmm.
I had no inkling of the fact that, like, in a way, almost the main character of the movie is like the father who isn't even in the car.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the mother is just as much the main character, I guess. But like, it's so interesting to me how I had no real notion that this was actually a movie about a marriage that was failing and the impact of that marriage on the son that is beloved by both parents, and then there's a rabid dog.
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie gets flattened, and the story in general gets flattened into rabid dog trapped in a car at the end. And I think there is delightfully so much more going on than just that very simple but very effective conceit.
Yeah, we build up toward the rabid dog trapped in a car. It's a pretty slow burn, actually. Like,
yeah, that was the biggest surprise to me. Is this is a blissfully 96-minute film. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's in and out, and it's not until 50 minutes into this 96-minute film that our characters are first trapped in the car, that they first encounter the rabid Cujo and get stuck in the car. So
yeah,
that's almost an hour before we get to that part of the film.
And when they're trapped in the car, it's extremely well done. Like, it's so intense and just really good filmmaking. I was continually kind of just, when you're watching a movie and you're just like, I have no idea how they did that. Like, what it looks like is a rabid Saint Bernard trying to break into a car and trying to kill these people. And obviously that's not what's happening, but it's just real good. I don't know, man. That dog deserves an Oscar.
Yeah, I mean, we joked about Louis Teague, the director of this film, because he was in a whole bunch of stuff that Cat's Eye, by the way, is a Stephen King adaptation as well.
Okay.
But not a lot of huge works to his name. But I agree with you. I was kind of extremely surprised how effective this movie was. Like, I had definitely seen it before. It had been a while, and I definitely, in the back of my mind, wrote it off as just, the entire runtime of the film is just them with the dog stuck in the car with the dog on the outside. And every bit of that sequence is actually just wonderfully done. Like you're absolutely right. The special effects, the filmmaking, the tension, the thing that really affected me the most, and this might just be a product of me being a relatively new father, is the first time they get stuck in the car and the little boy, Tad, his reaction to seeing the dog and immediately assuming this is the monster that's been in his closet is really bone chilling to me. Like it just felt very real. It felt very earnest, and it felt like this kid is legitimately terrified. He's legitimately terrified. He's panicking. I very easily transpose my son onto this kid and that reaction, and I felt like immediately just awful. And I was like, I wanted to save him. I wanted to get him out of there immediately. It was very, very effective.
It really does make me wonder how they got that level of performance out of a kid who, I mean, that kid couldn't have been older than 5.
Yeah, I think the character is supposed to be 4.
The actor looked 4.
Yeah.
but like that, like a 4-year-old can't like really act. So
did they just scare the bejesus out of this kid?
They may have just scared the bejesus out of the kid, which one can have mixed feelings about. But regardless, it definitely, I've never seen a more actually terrified child on film. So they may have actually just scared the bejesus out of the kid.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the other beat that I love so much of this, and I think any parent out there listening will feel this as well. We cut from that scene of him like panicking and freaking out to a scene of him like just casually coloring in a book.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know how much longer it was. Presumably it's, several minutes have gone by, but just the idea of that this kid is having a full emotional breakdown at being terrified by the monster that's outside their car, to just like being totally calm and casual and sitting in the car coloring. It's like, yep, that's a kid. All right.
Yep. No, that was great. Before we move on from that first moment, like, you rarely really get chills from film, or at least I rarely do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the build up, like just the perfect execution of, the first time the dog lunges at the car and she gets the door closed, and the boy is screaming that it's the monster, and she's like, she's also like upset, but she's not nearly as afraid as she's gonna be, and she's like, no baby, there's no such thing as monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately, like, the dog just lunges up onto the hood and is smashing and snarling and roaring at the windshield, and the kid just starts screaming bloody, and you have like the mixed sound of the dog snarling and the kids screaming, and just like it's this genius like moment, just in terms of storytelling and in terms of filmmaking, I think.
I totally agree. It's so well done. It is, bone chilling, I think is the exact right phrase. It is terrifying. And I mean, it continues throughout the rest of this, the next 40 minutes, right? There's wonderful bits and pieces of this whole sequence. I love the one, we've got the established, phone ringing really bothers Cujo, right? Like it really, I think in the book it goes into detail, like loud noises really, really set him off when he's slowly being affected by the rabies. And like you kind of establish that the phone rings and he's going to try to go back to the house to try to get the phone to stop. And in this moment, like we think that's happening, and then suddenly he turns and just like charges headlong into the car and just like headbutts the car at top speed. And that is absolutely terrifying. I think, I love St. Bernards. They're just such goofy, lovable dogs, which I think is, part of the reason a St. Bernard was picked for this, right? There's this idea that, yes, it's a giant dog, but for the most part, they're kind of dopey and gentle and slow moving and not really threatening at all. And yet so effectively turned this dopey, slow moving thing into an absolute monster.
Yeah. That's that's the funny thing about dogs, is they're big and heavy and strong, and it's easy to forget how strong they can be.
Yeah, I definitely think that if I had watched this movie when I was a young, extremely impressionable child, I just wouldn't like dogs anymore. Because I don't know how you like show this movie to a kid and they're like, yeah, dogs are great.
Yeah, especially if they don't already have like a dog friend who they can compare it to and be like, well, that's not normal.
Yeah.
One thing that surprised me, and maybe I'm weird and maybe I'm like the only person in the world who's had this reaction, but maybe it's just because I love dogs so much, but I found Cujo the character of Cujo to be um more pitiable, and like I it's not like it's the shark in a shark movie, or like the monster in some other monster movie. It's like this is a dog who was a nice dog who's losing its mind due to a disease that doesn't deserve. And obviously the dog is not, giving the performance, but at moments you feel like the dog is confused about what's happening, and like the rage is coming upon it kind of out of nowhere. And I don't know, I think it's just the idea is that I empathize with any animal that gets rabies, because it's like the most terrifying disease in the world. um
Yeah, I'm. This is great. I'm so glad you picked up on this because I think this is, I know you haven't read the book, but this is one of the big things about the book. One of the things that Stephen King does in this book is we see a lot of the book from the perspective of Cujo. We are with Cujo as he first gets bit by the bat in the rabbit cave, and we are with Cujo in his mind as we see him kind of like slowly lose grip and slowly like the dog is like terrified as it's like not understanding why it's so angry, why its mind is so clouded, why it's so easy to anger. Like it's this very slow burn over the course of the first 100 pages or so of watching Cujo like transform into this monster from the perspective of the sweet innocent dog inside of him. So one of the big questions I had about this actually going into this was whether that could possibly be translated to screen, because the big thing we're missing is the actual literal inside Cujo's head point of view. But I'm so glad to hear that you at least somewhat picked up on that, because I do think that's what the director is trying to do here, because I think it is such an important part about the story is that yes, Cujo is a monster by the end of the book, but he's also a victim of a horrible monstrous disease.
Yeah. Well, I think they put in the time to try to communicate it, because they do show him being a happy, sweet dog at the beginning. And then they give us the scene where he comes upon the boy who's like his master in the fog. And I like it's not textually stated, but my reading of the scene is like the disease is pushing him into a rage, and he's using his willpower, for lack of a better word, to resist and turn away, and he leaves the boy alone. And somehow that seems like an important step where it's like, well, the dog really doesn't want to kill its boy, obviously. But like the disease is just pushing it, and making it react insanely and increasingly.
You're absolutely right, and I think the use of the fog there was such a great element, right, to really cement kind of the brain fog that's happening over this dog. It's a perfect way of not technically getting inside his mind, but also kind of sort of getting inside his mind.
It's kind of just that scene is actually a pretty cool notion too, because like if you have a dog and you've ever had a moment where the dog, this has happened to me before, where like the dog just is suddenly really scary. That can be a really freaky experience, because it's like you feel like this is my friend that I know and trust, and in some sense I know that they would like do anything for me, and then suddenly they're acting like a wild animal. In the case that I'm thinking of, I'm pretty sure what happened was the dog knew or thought that there was like a wild animal nearby, and I was misunderstanding the signals. But like in the moment, it was like, oh, suddenly the fact that there's a dog who weighs only slightly less than me with its teeth bared is in my presence, and I don't understand why. Like even that can be scary, and that's like, so I don't know. I appreciated even that small moment of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Siberian Husky, which is, not a huge dog. She's like, I think 55 pounds or so, but she looks like a wolf, right? And there's times when this very, very sweet, wonderful dog that I love so much just like looks at you, and you're like, oh yeah, you're an animal. like you are domesticated, but like, I don't know, Huskies apparently suffer from Alzheimer's pretty common. It's one of the more common diseases they can get, and like the idea that my dog could, through through just brain confusion, just suddenly, revert back to their animalistic nature is like something that it's not always on my mind, but there's a couple times I've just like been laying with my dog under my legs, like petting it. It was like, this thing could just like bite the shit out of me and I probably couldn't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just interesting. I find the whole concept of dogs to be so fascinating, that we have this companion species. It's just such a cool. If dogs weren't real, then it would seem like a fantasy notion,
No, yeah. I mean, it's like what is the daemons or the demons from
I think I
what is the
forget
name of
whether
that
it's Daemon or
series?
Demon.
Yeah.
The Golden Compass.
Golden Compass, yeah. His Dark Materials is the name of the series. Yeah. It's not that, but it's like a more realistic equivalent of that. It's like, oh yeah, we just all have these things, and they just like, my dog is sitting under me right now, like demanding that I pet its head. It's like, this is a wild thing that we have.
It's pretty cool.
And I love that, like, conceptually, that this story that King came up with here like really builds off of that idea. It's like, this is the thing that is supposed to be safe and love you unconditionally, and then it can be transformed. I think King actually said, as with all good story ideas from Stephen King, it came from a real life experience where he like literally like took a car of his, or I think it was a motorcycle of his, to a workshop like in the middle of nowhere, Maine, and his motorcycle broke down like right as he was getting there, and then suddenly this big huge dog stepped out and started growling at him, and he was just like, what would happen if I was stuck here?
Yeah, this is quite the scenario.
Yeah. And I think he had like a shitty old Pinto at the time that never worked right, and so I think he's also taking out some of his frustration on because that's the same car that is in this story.
I love that I love this. Okay, so somehow this feels like a good segue to talking about like some of the other themes, because the mom is left to drive a shitty old Pinto, which is like a stereotypically shitty car, and the husband drives around a literal red convertible Jaguar.
Yeah, a very good car, a very nice car. Yeah.
And it's just like kind of we're doing a lot of things that I don't know that I've actually quite sorted out yet, but like we've got these ideas of the husband is sort of neglecting his wife, and she has gone into the arms of her high school boyfriend. And then we've got like the guy who runs the car shop out of his barn, and he's like a really shitty, probably abusive husband and father with like a terrified, browbeaten wife and son, and she's kind of like wheeling and dealing so she can go on a vacation to see her sister. And then the husband, like that husband's going to use this as an opportunity to get up to some shenanigans, and like there's just a lot of really interesting like marriage dynamics breakdown, cynicism in the movie. And I don't know that I could like write it out as a thesis statement other than just sort of describing the things that I see, at this point. What do you think? Like maybe does the book, I want to say, does the book explain this? But I'm like, no, Matt, you're not a 12-year-old. You can figure out what the movie's trying to do. But I guess what I mean to ask is is there some through line to this that I'm missing?
No, I think you're spot on with a lot of the stuff that the story is doing, and obviously the book can go into more detail about this, but we do very specifically have these two marriages that are like not in a great spot, and people in those marriages that are not behaving very well, on both sides, on all sides, right? The thing that I find so interesting, and this is spoilers for Cujo the book, the big change in this movie is actually very, very true to the story. Basically all of our plot beats are still there. But the big change is that in the novel, the kid dies after everything's said and done. She defeats the dog in a similar way. I don't think she shoots it in the head with a gun. I think she just stabs it with the bat. I think that part was right. But it's too late. The kid has succumbed to heat exhaustion and dies. And his death is kind of the catalyst that allows their marriage to kind of repair itself. So the ending of the book, we move to kind of a postscript several months later, and they have their marriage has survived the encounter and strengthened, and we leave them on kind of an optimistic path. Also on the Chambers side, the Cujo's family, their marriage seems to be doing okay. The little boy gets a new dog at the end of it, one that was actually vaccinated for rabies, because that's one thing the book points out, is that like, I should have gotten this thing vaccinated for rabies, but I never did because I'm stupid.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So there is a little bit of through line of this encounter, taking broken relationships and the trauma and horror of it actually being used to mend them in a way.
That's quite interesting, because if I'm not mistaken, the Chambers' father is killed by Cujo, right? In the movie.
I think that might still be true, actually.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, anyway, regardless,
yeah, it's not that their marriage is mended, but that the relationship between the mother and child are at least doing. Yeah,
there's some mending as a response to the terror and challenge that they're put through. Yeah.
And I think you can maybe understand from a completely logical manner why they could not leave the kid dies at the end plot in a film, right? Like that just seems like after all is said and done, because it's one of the most heartbreaking parts of the novel, is that like after everything she's gone through, after everything she's done, after all the suffering and trying and the trials and tribulations, and she finally defeats the dog, and it's just like, nope, he's dead. Sorry.
Yeah. That would have been a massive bummer. I'm trying to think if there's like any way you could do that where it wouldn't, because like I don't know, this seems like one of those things where I actually just find it hard to like believe like objectively that a husband and wife's marriage would be like repaired by the brutal rabid dog related death of their son.
Sure.
So I'm just kind of like, I think I would just find this ending more like credible. I don't know. It makes me curious, like, because I'm sure the way King executes it works like narratively.
I think it does. I mean, I like, there's different ways you can react to that kind of trauma, and I think in this way it allows them to see what's important in their lives, and they're able to kind of rediscover each other in a certain way, but dealing with this horrible tragedy of losing their son. But yeah, I mean, I see your point for sure.
Yeah, it's fine either way. I guess, it makes it more of a movie that people can walk out of with a happy feeling.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's no way you could spend this much money on a movie and just like people would be furious. Like, this is one of those things that like it's an adaptive choice that makes total sense to me. Like, I think the ending of the book very much works in that it's supposed to feel heartbreaking, but you're supposed to get this little tinge of hope at the end. But I can't imagine seeing a movie like it's just the medium is different, and there's different rules to it. So I totally get it.
Well, it's just a funny idea in the first place, because it's almost like King was like, what are two of the main rules that you can't break? Well, you can't kill a dog and you can't kill a kid. And I'm going to do both of those.
Yeah.
And it's I guess I don't know if I'm thinking about this clearly or not, but like basically Cujo, from like more than half of the movie, he doesn't look like a dog anymore. Almost like he's got the like horrible like mucus running down from his eyes, and like his face is covered in like blood and mud. And he's just
and he just gets more wet and damp and caked, and
he just looks more like demonic and disgusting as the movie goes on. And I feel like, number one, that probably the main reason to do that is to make him scarier, like obviously. But then like a secondary reason is like, now you don't have to feel bad about the dog getting stabbed in the heart, because you don't really see it as a dog anymore by that point. It's just turned into an actual monster, like visually.
I agree. I think that was something that they realized they needed to do. If like it's just a Saint Bernard the whole time being a Saint Bernard, but also it's kind of scary that we want to feel bad for the dog, but we also want her to kill it. Like I think this is a fine line this movie has to walk, and I think it achieves it. And part of the special effects on what it looked like were part of that.
Yeah, and I think she does a good job being. I always, I think it must be really hard to do these roles where you're like, the character, where you're playing the character in like a thriller or whatever, who's sort of like being stalked and hunted, and there's not much dynamism to that kind of role because you're just kind of scared the whole time. But she does a really good job with it. You can I like how you can kind of see her thinking things through in her eyes as she considers different plans, and she's actually like smart. She figures things out, but then it just doesn't work out because it's just a bad situation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Dee Wallace is the actress who played the main character, and she's incredible. Also, the mother in E.T., if you were wondering where you recognized her from.
Yes. Okay.
She's phenomenal. She's so good in this movie. And I think you're right. The fun thing about this, thinking about performances in movies like this, is part of the performance is this character has to get more and more exhausted, more injured, more tired, more desperate. And so like, just imagine, this is probably filmed out of order. Like imagine like getting in Monday morning after a long weekend and okay, I have to get right back into being at the end of my rope in this encounter with this dog, right? You have to transform yourself and she pulls it off. Like I really feel every moment. I feel every moment of desperation. There's so little dialogue in these moments, right? And she has to sell what she's thinking through what she looks like and where her eyes are going and how she's moving. And like, you can see the moment where she kind of just decides, I have to do something. We can't hide anymore. Like even if it ends up being my death, we can't. This is it. This is it. This is all there is. And so, like, I think she pulls that off so well. But you can also see like the calculation early on where it's like I could risk to run for the front door, but I don't know if it's locked or not. And if the dog gets me and kills me, my kid is fucked. My kid is totally fucked.
Yeah. No, I agree. You definitely track through all of the details of this, and exactly as you said, you understand that at a certain point she's like, I may die in doing this, but if I don't, then my son will definitely die.
Yeah, he's dying. Like, the moments where he's like seizing from heat exhaustion and dehydration, man, that was another really rough to watch moment to me. I wonder how they had the kid do that, right? It's like, I'm sure he thought he was just playing a fun game.
There's a couple moments in there where he's making this face, and I think the camera, the director, the cameraman, whoever, they know like, oh my God, this is the most fucked up face that I've ever seen a little kid make. This is great.
Yeah.
We've got to like keep the like center of the frame. It's like his like his like chin and like teeth are like jutting out, and he's like, it's like this horrible pained snarl, and he's like clawing at his throat, and it's like, it's so upsetting to watch.
It is very upsetting to watch. Yeah,
that's great.
That's what I mean. Like I was so surprised by how quality this movie was. Like I really just kind of wrote it off as like a simple one note movie, and it's so not. It's just very, very well done.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the things I did want to talk to you about, and this is when I'll try to stretch us into doing Dark Tower tangent type stuff here, is especially speaking of The Stand and what we've been talking about the last few months, is there are several moments in the movie where she specifically like turns to God. Like this is a woman that she doesn't seem really overtly religious throughout the early parts of the movie, but she's in this desperate situation, and I counted at least two, maybe there's more, where she just specifically prays to God. It was just like, just let my boy live, just get me out of here, like these type of things. And I was really interested in this because, again, do the thing we always do where you just remove the word God, insert the white, and see what this could mean and what happens. And the interesting thing about it to me is she makes this prayer, and then she kind of solves her own problem, right? She is the instrument of her survival in the end. Like, she goes out there, challenges the dog, gets to the bat, fights the dog, defeats the dog, and it's almost like as a present, as a gift, the white almost brings her son back from the dead. I think that the remarkable thing to me about the Tad is actually alive scene is he seems like he's just gone. Like, you know, I wonder if the people that read this book before they watched the adaptation were just like, oh, here's the part where the kid is dead. And then it just like right on the cusp of giving up, it's like he's almost resuscitated. And it does feel like there's this extra power thing going on circling around this moment. And I don't think any of that's like textual. I don't think anyone making the movie was thinking about that, but it is interesting putting this in the overarching Stephen King metaverse of greater power and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Now that we have these beats of comparison in The Stand and The Talisman and Black House, where it's like the important thing is, you know, she basically made a statement of faith in a higher power, and then she was the one who took a stand. She because that's what in King's cosmology, I think that's what the white demands of you. Is it demands that you take a stand. You have to be the one who actually takes the stand, and then the white never bribes you, but it might reward you. And the reward here would be her child gets to live. It's funny because I agree with you that none of that was intended in the film, but it absolutely works in the cosmology of how King has structured all of this. Yeah. And I definitely noticed when she asks God for help, and I was definitely thinking about that and comparing that to all the stuff that we just talked about in The Stand for so many weeks.
That's why it's so fun we get to do this. I really enjoy slotting this stuff into King's cosmology. It's a lot of fun. There is one thing related to the book that I wanted to breach with you, because I don't think we're ever probably going to have an in-depth conversation about this book, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is the monster in the closet idea, right? This is something that plays in the movie, and it's played very straightforwardly. He's a little kid. He thinks there's a monster in the closet. He thinks there's a monster under his bed, and it works metaphorically as like this kid is afraid of this thing living in his house, and the actual thing living in his house is this almost rotting marriage, right? That the kid is not fully consciously aware of, but is perhaps, you know, projecting onto this monstrous force that's living in his house. The thing that's interesting about the book, Matt, is it's heavily implied actually that there might just literally be a real monster living in this kid's closet. Like, it doesn't come right out and say it ever, but it also, like, the way King writes that sequence, it's almost, and it has nothing to do with Cujo. Like, it's not like the monster that's in his closet like literally gets into the rabies. It's nothing to do with it, but it's just like this really fun kind of throwaway idea of like, okay, there's all this going on, but also there might actually be a monster in this kid's closet.
Yeah. Maybe there are monsters in closets.
Which, I mean, fits in King's universe, certainly.
Yeah, there's a couple things about the monster in the closet thing that I love. So one of them is, again, the movie respects you as the viewer. It's subtle, but what happens is you understand that, okay, there's something wrong with the latch on the door handle, such that when you push it closed, the slightest perturbation will let it just swing open later. And to a kid, obviously that's because there's a monster inside the closet pushing the door open to look at you. So what's funny is the dad comes in later to tuck him in, and the dad closes the door and it immediately opens again. And then the dad, you know, and he closes it again, and then he turns back, and it's like, you idiot, like the door is just going to swing open again as soon as you leave. Like, the problem is that you aren't seeing to the obvious, like, physical malfunctioning door handle. Any adult would immediately recognize the problem and be like, oh yeah, it's understandable that you're scared because your door handle is malfunctioning, and I should fix that and not just close the door again and pretend that that's going to do it. Like, he doesn't even give it like a shove or anything to like set it. It's so like so again, that's to me a great way of communicating very subtly, like, this guy is not really aware of the problems in his household.
Yeah.
He just wants to be able to say like, ah, God, come on, just get over it. Just go back to sleep. It's fine. And he's not a bad dad. He's really sweet and loving and caring to his son, but it's a kind of like refusal to engage with the realities around him.
Hmm.
And I just love that little tiny moment of him closing the door as a metaphor for all of that.
Yeah, I like that, and I think we can kind of carry that forward with the idea of the words, right? The
Mhm.
monster words, where he develops this kind of system for, going systematically around the room and telling all the monsters in all the places that they're not welcome here, and his son's terror at the idea that his father's going to leave and he won't have that protection anymore. And he goes, no,
Mhm.
no, no, see, I wrote down the words. And he gives them this thing which shows up again when they're trapped in the car, right?
Mhm.
And his mom takes them, and he like is immediately like, no, give them back, they're not for you, they're for me, they're my, like. And this again shows the absenteeism of the father, the lack of communication between the husband and wife, and it represents all these things, and the kids attempting to process what's happening without fully understanding the full depth of it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really good. It's really good. Like, it's remarkable to me how effective the first 50 minutes of this movie are,
Mhm.
because you go into this movie, I think, expecting the rabies dog movie, and the fact that we take our time really laying all these characters out, laying the situation out before we go there is really effective, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're reminding me of another great moment where one of the many times Cujo attacks and the boy is screaming, "I want my daddy! I want my daddy!"
Yeah.
And she's like, "I know, I'll get your daddy. I'll get your daddy!" Like,
Yeah.
she's like mad that he wants the dad, and because
Yeah.
she's right, you can almost imagine like, I'm right here, what do you want, what is he
Right.
gonna do, I'm the one who's here. Which, and you could even like, you could take that a bunch of ways, because it's like he's the one who left us in this shitty Pinto, just
Yeah.
like he didn't fix your door. Like,
Hmm.
so you could aim it as like condemning him for abandoning them to this situation, but also like, well, the reason he's not here is because you're being a shitty wife,
Yeah,
right?
it's really layered, right? Because like,
Yeah,
we can't lay on the blame on him. We can't lay all the blame on her. It's both of them. It's this combination that gets them in this situation.
yeah.
And I do appreciate that part of the reason he's gone has to do with his ad campaign,
Mhm.
which centered around a fake doctor telling children that a cereal was perfectly okay for them,
Uh-huh.
and it wasn't at all. Which reflects, I think, this idea that he's going around telling his son, there are no monsters in here, we don't have to worry about it, there are no monsters, just kidding.
Mhm.
Here's Cujo, he's an actual monster. So just like he lied
Yeah.
inadvertently to all the children with his television commercial, he lied to his own child.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So wasn't it just that like the cereal had dye in it, which was making everyone think that they were shitting blood when it was actually
Yes.
just the dye,
Yes.
which is just hilarious.
Peeing and
Yeah.
shitting blood.
Yeah.
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 There was no actual like medical
Yeah.
problem with any of the kids
Like,
eating the cereal, but it was scaring the shit out of people. Yeah.
which kind of also works, that the idea that it's just terrifying them regardless of whether it's hurting them, because
Hmm.
he's he's trying to reassure them and they're not reassured, right?
Yeah.
That's great. The other thing about the monster in the room sequence that I just wanted to talk about, how I love the boy. I think he's going to the bathroom. I don't remember super clearly, but like I think he goes to the bathroom, then he comes back into his room, and he has his hand on the light switch, and the camera like makes it seem like the room is like
It like stretches to be
50,
like a
yeah,
mile, right?
it's just
Yeah.
this huge gulf of space, and you can see him like getting into a sprinter's stance, like getting ready to run, and just like knowing like, it's like as soon as the light turns off, they're gonna come, like they're
Hmm.
gonna come for me from all sides, and I gotta get back under those covers before they get me. And I'm like, oh my god, this is like all that stuff in Salem's Lot and other stuff that we've talked about, where
Yeah.
it reminds you of stuff that you absolutely did when you were a kid. Like, I totally would go to the bathroom and like turn the light off and then get in bed as quickly as possible so that the thing under the bed couldn't get me.
I'm
Absolutely.
I'm kind of jealous of people who have the ability to have that kind of recall, because like I certainly see things like this and immediately remember that exact same scenario in my head. But
Mhm.
like if you asked me like to come up with this on my own, I don't think I would remember that. I don't think I would remember doing that. But like that memory is absolutely triggered by seeing
Mhm.
stuff like this and being like, yes, I did this exact thing. I remember very specifically this exact thing. And I
Yeah.
remember all things like it. Like I remember taking the trash out at night and like,
Mhm.
you know, the second I turned around to head back to the house, the second I turned around is when the monsters were going to start chasing after me. So I would like put the trash out and then I would like ready myself and whip myself around and sprint up the driveway as fast as I could. And like, I don't remember that. Like, that's just not something that's the top of my head. But the second you see the scene, it's like, yes, that's exactly it. So I just want to be like, who are you, person that just has this kind of amazing recall that can just write that into a story? I, I'm jealous a little bit, because you're absolutely right. This is to a T what being a child is like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so much of my favorite of King's stuff is literally just accurately remembering childhood,
Hmm.
with very little embellishment, actually.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I think so funny about this movie and the story in general, but maybe this movie specifically, is thinking about what a modern day version of this would look like. And I mean, one of the big things, of course, is you would have to have a throwaway line about cell phone signal or dead
Mhm.
phone, or both. You know,
Mhm.
you'd have to do something, and then you'd probably have to build a whole plot line in it where like I'm just imagining her like trying to like open the car window and like stick her arm with the cell phone on it out the window and like trying to raise it into the air to like pick up on a signal. It's just so weird how like this movie's came out in 83, so it's 40 years old now, right? And in
Mhm.
these 40 years, like everything's changed to the point where you couldn't just tell the story flatly anymore. You would have to add things to it to make it work in the modern times.
Yeah. No, it's funny. As soon as you started saying that, I was like, yeah, like maybe she drops the phone outside of the car, and then
Mhm.
and then she
Mhm.
like tries to get the phone back.
Yeah.
Then by the time she gets it back, like, oh no, now the signal's bad. Or like you could add all kinds of anxiety around the phone. You
Yeah.
could make the whole movie focus around the phone. I mean, which
Yeah.
is it sort of is focused around the phone in some ways, but it just happens to be the landline phone in the house that she can't get to.
Yeah, and her husband trying to call her phone, the
Mhm.
landline at their home, which I think that another change would be that like he would figure something out was wrong like way
Mhm.
sooner, because like at least if you're calling a landline, you could make the mental argument, oh, she's just not home. But if you're calling someone's cell phone over and over again, like something's going on there.
Mhm. Yeah. No. The I guess maybe the only thing that I thought was kind of silly was the like the red herring strangeness of like the boyfriend coming back and slashing up their bed, and then the husband thinking that it was the boyfriend, and then there's just kind of a wild goose chase going on there.
Yeah, I think like that feels like just laying tracks in order to get the husband
Mhm.
out to the farm. Like I agree. The thing that I think the movie, the one thing maybe the movie didn't have time for is like the boyfriend character. I don't think you get enough time with him to go like, oh, why would you do that,
Mhm.
actually? Like, why would you go there? Like, I
Mhm.
mean, obviously he's kind of a possessive jerk, and we see enough of him to see that. But like to me, it felt like an over escalation to the point that I don't think was established enough why this character would behave that way.
Yeah, we don't I mean he actually seems very like cool and chill and laid
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Mostly there's like the one moment when he like comes after her to get when
Hmm.
she's going to the car, but we don't really see how that plays out.
Yeah.
So I agree that I mean basically my complaint boils down to like that's kind of like a narrative oxbow that you could have just pinched off and just said he goes home, his wife isn't there, the car isn't there,
Yeah.
he thinks, oh, maybe she took the car to the one guy, and then goes there, and then
Yeah.
it's just a little bit more. Yeah, I just didn't feel like it added anything actually.
I agree. I think you could. It seems like a very solvable problem, and I think, yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue like part of that is we're trying to really dive into the affair itself and like the effect it's having on the marriage and their consciousness of it, and so bringing that part to a head, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very easily excised from the story. without losing too much.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I could imagine you bring it more to a head and you have the husband like kick the guy's ass or something, which would be like plot at least. But as it is, it literally is just kind of a meander, right?
You just have the boyfriend show up at the place too and get eaten by Cujo.
I kind of thought that was going to happen, but he just doesn't show up again at all.
No, it's just that cop.
Yeah.
Which, can we talk about like the world's most chill police detective ever?
Yes.
So I don't know. There's a woman and her child missing. A house has been ransacked. He sends an officer out to the mechanic shop to check maybe if she's out there or if her car's there or something, and he just disappears. And he's just like, oh yeah, that guy hasn't checked in yet.
Yeah,
he's probably doing something.
Yeah, we'll sort it out, sir, don't worry yourself.
Yeah. And like the guy takes off and they don't follow him. They're just like, we're gonna keep looking for him.
Husbands, man. It's like, yeah, it's I thought that was kind of that's the thing, is like all of the silliness and stuff I didn't love was like in that one piece of the movie where it's like the cops don't need to be involved in this, right? Like I don't like this is the kind of story where I think I would have liked it more if the cops were never involved, because it's like then you can just kind of imagine that this is just a thing that happened to some people one time.
Yeah.
It didn't have to escalate.
And I guess the other thing I want to talk to you about this is the ending itself. So the ending is just they all three get together and then there's this big like moment, and then we just freeze frame it. So there is no like denouement. There is no postscript where we see 6 months later or something they're doing okay. There's none of that. We just stop it. And I just want to say, I am a fan of the freeze frame ending, and I think we should do more freeze frame endings. It's like the story's over. We see they hug. That's all we need. Yeah. Like we don't have to explicitly say like that their marriage is repaired or like there's hope for their marriage, but like it's really implied by that moment. And then we just stop, and then we're just done. Freeze frame, roll credits. Let's get out of here. Yeah. I want more of that. Actually, I
agree. No, it was like a perfect Renaissance painting, because it's like she's holding her hands out to him in this really kind of unnatural, desperate way. It's just absolutely poignant, actually, because it's like, oh my God, and it was funny is he's too late to do anything, like, because the whole movie actually thought he was going to show up and like save them, but it's like, no, he doesn't. She does everything. He shows up literally 5 seconds later than he's totally worthless, actually, but like still she's holding her hands out to him, and she holds the boy out to him, and he takes the boy, and like they're holding the boy between them in this beautiful symbolic fashion, right? Yeah,
which again is almost the opposite of the message of the book. Rather, like this seems to imply that the link that is going to keep them strong is their son, that they both recognized that maybe they've been not taking good enough care of this kid, and their marriage difficulties have been hurting their son, and that's how they're going to reform the relationship or whatever. Yeah. So it's almost the exact opposite of what the book says.
Yeah, we do need to bring back freeze frames in modern films, including the cheesy music and everything.
It's so good, man, and it just doesn't waste any time. We don't need like the slow fade out zoom to credits. Just freeze frame, roll them. Let's do it.
Yeah,
everybody go home.
I think what we should do, Scott, is we should start a movie studio, and the movie studio's name will be 90-minute films.
Hold on, let me check. 90-minute films or 90-minute studios?
I
like films. I like films.
I like 90-minute films because the implicit promise of the studio 90-minute films is that our films are about 90 minutes. And then people will say, should we go see the Warner Brothers picture, which will be 3.5 hours? Or should we go see 90-minute films new feature? And then obviously they'll go see our movie, because movies are too fucking long anymore.
Yeah, I'm seeing Avatar this weekend, which I am beyond excited for, but it's 3 hours and 6 minutes. And it's like, fuck, when am I going to carve time out for this?
Oh my god. And I'm gonna have to take my kids to a 3-hour
Uh-huh.
movie.
And they're gonna have to go to the bathroom 6 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy that.
No, what I do
Did
is
you
I just
know
don't give
there's
them
a
any
whole
water.
there's if you go to Netflix, there's apparently a whole like genre filter for just movies about 90 minutes.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that.
So I'm looking this up, Matt, and 90-minute films, I do not
Uh-huh.
believe is a taken copyrighted name of a studio.
All
So
right.
we can
Well,
make it happen.
I declare copyright. Copyright registered trademark. There.
Do you
That's
know
how
what
that
would
works,
be the
right?
most fun about this actually? Would be making a 3-hour movie under the 90-minute films banner.
Yeah, just letting it creep gradually upward. uh,
We have to eventually adjust the trademark to 90-ish minute films.
uh-huh. No.
I love this idea. It's a great idea. Let's do it.
Okay. I agree.
Trademarked. You can't take that, listeners. You can't
Yeah.
do it. It's
Yeah.
ours now.
No takesies backsies.
Okay, Matt. I mean, we kind of blew through this pretty quickly, but anything else you wanted to really touch on in Cujo?
No, I mean, I think it was an elegantly simple movie, actually.
Yeah.
And it doesn't overstay its welcome. It has pretty clear theming, and it's a really effective movie about
Mhm.
a rabid Saint Bernard.
I guess one thing we should talk about, at least mention, just so we don't get an email saying we didn't mention it, is that one of the things this book is most well known for, as you know, because you read it in On Writing, is the book that King says he was so out of his mind on alcohol he doesn't really remember writing a lot of this one.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder, like, I'm sure there's parts of that that's true, but I've always kind of felt that was a little bit of King's storyteller exaggeration at work. Like, it makes the story sound better if he says, "I don't even remember writing this one. That's how drunk I was." Um, I'm sure it's partially true, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's not that I would say that he's lying, but rather like that's probably a line that comes over really well in a interview context,
Yeah,
and so he just says it that way.
yeah. I'm not minimizing the problem he had, which I think the thing is, while writing this book was kind of the pinnacle of his problem with alcohol. And it's a great it's a great example. It's a great anecdotal example he can tell when he's telling people, I was such an alcoholic that I wrote this whole book and I don't even remember it.
You
But
know,
it's also like it's funny because he also talks about it in the way of like when he got sober, one of the biggest things he was afraid of about getting sober was losing it, whatever
mhm.
it is, but losing this ability because he's such a skilled writer that he can churn a book like this out that he barely remembers writing.
Yeah, and I don't want to come down too firmly here because I've never been a high functioning alcoholic. Like maybe he can write at a high level of quality while being drunk enough that it impairs his memory.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe that's true. I'm
Sure.
not calling
Yeah.
him a liar. I'm just saying.
No, I'm not
Yeah,
either. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I just always felt it was a little bit more embellishment than fact because it is, you're absolutely right. It is such a good anecdote. And I think that's why it's stuck in people's memories so often. It's just like, it's the thing that people talk about when they talk about, like, you want to know a fun fact about this book? He doesn't even remember writing it.
Yeah. That's yeah.
All right. But that is Cujo. That's it. We did it. We did a big one, Matt. This is one of those ones, I think, like Cujo, like Carrie, has kind of just become ubiquitous in pop culture, right? Like, even people that haven't seen this movie, like you, like you can call a dog Cujo
Mm-hmm.
in pop culture and people will immediately know what you mean when you're calling a dog Cujo.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a clear archetype reference, which Stephen King invented, which is
Mm-hmm.
I guess an extension of his ability to come up with great premises is finding these things that then they sort of themselves turn into the touchstone for a whole archetype.
Yeah, and I wonder how that happens because it's not that this movie like did great, right? It did okay. It made $21 million domestically, which in '83 was like nothing to sneeze at. Like, it made money. It was a $6 million budget, so it made money for sure. But it wasn't like a huge hit that like everybody talked about. Um, and like reviews on it were pretty mixed. Like it wasn't a huge like critic success. I think our boy Roger Ebert notoriously hated it.
Hmm.
Gene Siskel, his friend, I'm looking at the review, says it was one of the dumbest, flimsiest excuses for a movie I have ever seen. So like it wasn't loved by critics. It did okay at the box office. How does a thing like that go from that to huge cultural osmosis? I'm not even sure. I'm not even really sure how to answer that.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because I encountered somebody recently who was like, "Oh, I can never watch Stephen King. It's just too scary." And it's funny because I'm like, to each their own, but Stephen King stuff is actually not that scary.
Mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm.
maybe people are mad at me for saying that, but like how much of I'm always very entertained, but I'm not often that I'm not like the emotion I'm feeling is not like fear.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of other emotions for sure. But I think it's just like maybe it's as simple as like you see the trailer of like a horrifying snarling dog and it's such a vivid image that it actually just sticks in your mind forever. Um I don't know. It's fascinating. I would love to if somebody's ever done like some kind of analysis on like how a meme like Cujo, as just a reference, totally disconnected from anybody who's ever actually seen the movie, how that percolates through the culture. I would love to understand that better.
Yeah, this is, man, you make me want to go down a rabbit hole and actually figure out the um the kind of the story of this, because how does this happen? Because like Carrie was a smash hit, right? So like you can kind of draw the line between Carrie, a movie, and Carrie, becoming a thing that people say when they're describing someone, snapping, right? Like you can kind of draw, that's a pretty straight line that you can draw between those. But this one, I don't know. I want to figure this out. So yeah, if anyone has any information that lived during that remembers living during some of this time, and can maybe see how the pop culture really shifts and morphs around this, I'd love to know it.
I mean, I'm even sitting here going, why do I know what Cujo is?
Yeah,
Like
that's true. Why do yeah?
And I don't know. It's telepathy.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us for this month. That was a lot of fun. I haven't actually picked what we're going to do for the first one of 2023, Matt. I actually think it might be fun to do Storm of the Century, which is not an adaptation. It is a Stephen King television show. I say television show. It's more of a miniseries. It's how many episodes? It's 3 episodes. So it's not really based on any original work. It's just he wrote a miniseries, and I think it's on Hulu now, so it'd be fun to take a look at. It's 4 hours, so it's a little longer than a movie, but we're taking this month off, right? So we should have time to watch it.
Yeah, that's how that always works.
We're definitely gonna wait till the weekend before, but no, I think we should take a look at Storm of the Century, because honestly, I've never seen it, so this would be a one that's new for both of us, which does not happen very often on this show.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right.
I was just remembering that like sometime like when we were reading The Gunslinger, I said something to you along the lines of like, now I've seen almost all of the Stephen King adaptations, so I feel like I have a pretty good handle on Stephen King as a storyteller. And then you like scoffed softly. And you were like, there's a lot of Stephen King adaptations, and then I think I was like, well, I've probably seen like more than half of them. So I just want to remark that happened so that everyone can laugh at me again.
Yeah, the thing, we haven't even scratched the surface on this show. There's so many. There's like, especially in the 80s, like they made so many things. Like we referenced Cat's Eye because the director of this made Cat's Eye. You've not seen that.
I have not. And what, like, this is like episode like 20 something of this, isn't it? Yeah.
Or more. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild. All right, so next month, Storm of the Century. If you want to participate, you can look that up. It is on Hulu, all 3 episodes right now, so you can watch it and then hang out with us next week as we talk about it. Before we go, this is the last one of the year, and we just want to say thank you to our patrons so much. We're taking this time off on our show proper, but we still wanted to give you guys something, so we releasing an episode of this month anyway. And it's you guys that keep us going. It really is. The stuff costs money to produce, and we really appreciate that you're giving your hard-earned money to us to help us keep going. And just so you know, basically everything we get goes back into the organization. In fact, we're talking about ways that we can use some of the money we have to make some improvements to what we do right now, actually.
But yes, thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, so that is it. We'll see you in 2023 with Storm of the Century. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.